My wife gave our daughter's entire college fund to her young lover, and her public humiliation was only the beginning of a reckoning no one expected. The engine ticked as it cooled each metallic click, a tiny countdown in the suffocating silence of my car. My hands were still clamped to the steering wheel, the leather imprinted on my palms. I could feel the tremor in my knuckles, the last echo of an adrenaline surge that had nowhere left to go. Outside the windshield, the logo for Equinox Prime Fitness glowed in the late afternoon sun, a beacon of synthetic health and wellness that felt like a mockery. It was over. The shouting, the pointing, the beautiful, ugly scene I had orchestrated was done. And now there was only this hollow, ringing quiet. My throat was raw. I replayed the last 2 hours in my head, not as a memory, but as a movie I was forced to watch on a loop. Me walking onto the gym floor, my work boots looking absurd on the pristine rubber flooring. I didn't belong there. I was a 45-year-old man who built things with his hands, and this was a temple for people who built their bodies for show. I spotted him immediately. Leo Vargas, 25 years old with muscles sculpted by leisure and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was in the middle of a session with some woman correcting her form on a kettlebell swing, his hand lingering on her back for just a second too long. The casual intimacy of it sent a hot spike of rage through my gut. I didn't wait. I walked right up to them. My voice when it came out was louder than I intended. "Leo!" He turned, and that easy smile was still on his face, ready to greet a potential new client. It faltered when he saw me. He didn't know who I was, not yet, but he saw something in my eyes that made the smile curdle. The woman with the kettlebell took a step back. The rhythmic clank of weights around us slowed, then stopped. One by one, people turned to look. "Can I help you?" he asked, trying to project a confidence he clearly didn't feel. "You can," I said, my voice dropping into a low, dangerous calm. "You can explain to all these good people what kind of a man takes $50,000 from a 17-year-old girl's college fund." The color drained from his face. That was the moment. The perfect, crystalline moment when the arrogance fought with the fear and the fear won. He knew exactly who I was now. I saw the flash of panic, the quick glance toward the exits. He started to stammer something about a mistake, a misunderstanding. I didn't let him. I took a step closer, invading his personal space, forcing him to look at me. "Look, there's no misunderstanding," I said, making sure my voice carried across the silent gym. "My wife, Isabella Gonzalez, transferred $50,000 into your bank account 3 days ago. That money was for my daughter, Sophia. We saved it for 17 years. 17 years of my life, my work to give her a future. And you took it." He was shaking his head, mumbling, No, it wasn't like that." But the faces of the people watching told the real story. They saw a predator, a young preening fitness trainer, and a middle-aged man whose world had just been burned to the ground. They saw the truth. I pointed a finger at his chest. "You are a thief. You prey on women and you steal from children. I want everyone in here to know who you are. I want them to see what you really look like when the fake tan and the charm wears off." He finally found his voice a pathetic squeak. "Get out of here, man, or I'm calling the cops." "Go ahead," I remember saying with a bitter laugh. "Call them. Tell them Samuel Gonzalez is here. Tell them his wife of 18 years emptied their daughter's future into your pocket. See what they do." I didn't touch him. I didn't need to. I had stripped him bare in front of his clients, his colleagues, his world. I had humiliated him completely. And when I turned and walked out, the silence that followed me was heavier than any shout could ever be. It was a victory, a small, sour, temporary victory. But now sitting in my car, the victory felt like ashes in my mouth. The adrenaline was gone and the cold reality rushed in to fill the void. I was at my desk paying bills online when I saw the invoice from the university. Sophia's first tuition payment was due. It was a proud moment, the culmination of everything I'd worked for. I smiled, opened a new tab, and logged into the joint savings account, the Sophia Gonzalez College Tuition Fund. The balance read $0. Zero. A perfect, clean, impossible number. I blinked. I refreshed the page. Still zero. My heart started to hammer against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I clicked on the transaction history, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. And there it was, 3 days ago. An electronic funds transfer, one single transaction. Destination and account I didn't recognize. Amount $50,000. The entire balance, everything. I called Isabella at work. My voice was tight strained. I told her the bank had made some kind of catastrophic error. I could hear the false note in her voice, immediately the forced calm. She said she'd be home soon, that we'd figure it out. She came home an hour later. She couldn't look me in the eye. She stood in the foyer, her handbag still on her shoulder, and she confessed. The affair had been going on for 6 months with her personal trainer, Leo, the 25-year-old kid I'd seen her talking about with a little too much enthusiasm. The money, she said he needed it. He had a business idea, a dream. He was going to pay it back. She said it with such hollow conviction, as if she was trying to convince herself more than me. 18 years of marriage, dissolved in 5 minutes in our foyer. 17 years of saving, 17 years of me setting up that automatic monthly deposit from my salary, watching the balance grow, feeling a sense of pride and security with every statement. Every dollar in that account was a piece of my life. It was overtime shifts. It was saying no to vacations we couldn't afford. It was driving the same truck for a decade. It wasn't just money. It was a physical manifestation of my love for my daughter. It was a promise written in digits and interest rates. And Isabella, my wife of 18 years, my partner, the mother of my child, had taken that promise and handed it to her boy toy. She didn't just give him the money. She gave him Sophia's future. She gave him my sacrifice. The confrontation at the gym was a reflex, a primal need to do something asterisk. I couldn't punch him. I couldn't get the money back. All I could do was tear down the facade he lived behind. All I could do was show the world the parasite he was. It felt good for a moment. It felt like justice, but it didn't change the number in the bank account. It didn't pay the tuition invoice sitting on my desk. Now I have to put this car in drive. I have to navigate the familiar streets that lead to a house that is no longer a home. The locks are the same, but the trust that made it a sanctuary is gone forever. It's just a building now filled with 18 years of shared memories that now feel like lies. And inside that house is my daughter, Sophia. My brilliant, funny 17-year-old girl who has no idea that the earth beneath her feet has crumbled. She's probably in her room right now, looking at her acceptance letters, dreaming of dorm rooms and lecture halls, and a life that just 5 hours ago I had guaranteed for her. How do I face her? How do I walk through that door and look into her eyes that are so much like mine, and tell her that the future we've planned for her entire life has been stolen by her own mother? The weight of it is crushing. It's a physical pressure in my chest. I am 45 years old. I have always been the provider, the protector, the rock. My one job, my single most important purpose on this earth was to take care of my family. And I have failed. The public humiliation of Leo Vargas means nothing compared to the private humiliation of what comes next. The drive home is only 10 minutes, but I swear it feels like a journey across a barren, endless desert. And I know with a certainty that chills me to the bone that the shouting match in the gym wasn't the hard part. The hard part is waiting for me right behind my own front door. My hand finally turned the key in the ignition. The engine rumbled to life with a familiar, comforting sound that felt like a betrayal. Nothing should feel comforting right now. The truck rolled forward, leaving the gym parking lot, leaving the scene of my pathetic, impotent rage behind. Each turn of the wheel was a metronome ticking down the seconds until I had to face my daughter. The houses on my street looked the same as they did this morning. Manicured lawns, minivans in the driveways, the quiet illusion of suburban peace. I used to see it and feel a sense of belonging. Now I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I saw our house at the end of the cul-de-sac, the porch light already on a warm, welcoming beacon that promised a lie. It promised a home that no longer existed. I pulled into the driveway, cutting the engine. The silence that rushed in was deafening. For a solid minute, I just sat there, my hands still gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. This was the last moment of the old world. The last moment where Sophia's biggest worry was which meal plan to choose for her freshman year. Once I got out of this truck, once I crossed the threshold of that door, I was no longer just a father. I was a messenger of ruin. I was the man who had to explain the unexplainable to justify a betrayal that I myself couldn't comprehend. A deep breath. It did nothing. The air felt thin, useless. My heart was a cold, heavy stone in my chest. All right, Gonzalez, let's go. One foot in front of the other. The walk to the front door was the longest 10 yards of my life. I could feel the texture of every single paving stone through the soles of my shoes. I noticed a weed growing in a crack near the steps, and for a split second my brain fixated on it. I should pull that tomorrow. The absurdity of the thought almost made me laugh. My world is on fire. My life is a crater, and I'm worried about garden maintenance. The key felt foreign in my hand. I fumbled with the lock, my fingers clumsy and numb. Finally, the bolt clicked back. The sound echoed in the stillness. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The silence was immediate and absolute. It was a dead silence, not a peaceful one. Usually when I came home there was noise. The TV would be on in the living room, or music would be drifting down from Sophia's bedroom. But tonight there was nothing. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the frantic thumping of my own pulse in my ears. The air was still and heavy. Her car was in the driveway, so I knew she was here. My throat tightened. "Sophia!" I called out. My voice sounded rough alien. "In here, Dad." Her voice came from the living room. It was bright, cheerful, full of the easy, uncomplicated happiness of a 17-year-old who has her whole life mapped out in front of her. Every ounce of that brightness was a dagger in my gut. I took off my jacket, hanging it on the hook by the door with methodical slowness, delaying the inevitable for another few seconds. I ran a hand over my face, trying to scrub the exhaustion and fury away, trying to assemble a mask of normalcy. It was useless. I felt like a shattered mirror barely held together. I rounded the corner into the living room, and the sight that greeted me broke my heart all over again. There she was, my daughter Sophia, sitting cross-legged on the floor, completely surrounded by a sea of glossy brochures and official-looking documents. The university's logo, a proud, stylized eagle, was on everything. She had papers spread out like a general planning a campaign. Housing forms, financial aid letters that were now meaningless, a map of the campus, a welcome packet from the College of Engineering. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was chewing on the end of a pen, her brow furrowed in concentration. She was the perfect picture of hopeful ambition. She was everything I had worked for. She looked up as I came in, and her face broke into a huge, brilliant smile. That smile, it was the one she'd had since she was a little girl. The one that could make the worst day of my life feel manageable. Tonight, it just made everything worse. "Hey, Dad, you will not believe the course catalog they have. I can take Introduction to Aerospace Dynamics as a freshman." "A freshman, and look," she said, her excitement making her talk a mile a minute as she scrambled to hold up a brochure. "This is the dorm they recommended for engineering students. It's got a makerspace in the basement, a 3D printer and everything. Can you believe it?" I tried to smile back. I think it came out as more of a grimace. "Wow, sweetie, that's incredible." My voice was a croak. "I know, right?" She was too lost in her own excitement to notice my state. She was vibrating with energy, with the sheer potential of it all. "It's all starting to feel so real, you know, like it's not just a dream anymore. In a few months, I'm actually going to be there." She patted the floor next to her, a clear invitation to join her in her world of plans and dreams. I couldn't. I felt rooted to the spot, an unwelcome statue of despair in her sanctuary of hope. I just stood there in the doorway, watching her, my mind racing. I was watching a life that was about to be derailed, and the person holding the switch was me. My silence finally seemed to register. She tilted her head, her smile softening into a look of concern. "Dad, you okay? You look tired." "Yeah," I managed to say. "Yeah, just a long day at work." It was a lie, but it was the only thing I could offer. A flimsy shield to protect her for another few precious seconds. She seemed to accept it, turning her attention back to the papers in front of her. She picked up a single sheet of paper, the one that had started this whole nightmare. The tuition invoice. It looked so innocuous in her hand, just a piece of paper with numbers on it. But to me it was a death sentence. And then it happened. The trigger. The simple, innocent question that brought the entire collapsing structure of our lives crashing down on my head. She held up the invoice, pointing to a line item with her pen. "Hey, so I was just looking at this again," she said, her tone casual, logistical. "It says the first installment is due by the end of the month to secure my spot, and the housing deposit is actually due next Friday. I know we have the college fund all set up, but I wasn't sure how you wanted to do the actual payment. Should I just use the debit card for the joint account for the deposit, or do you want to do a wire transfer for the big tuition payment later? The website has instructions for both." There it was. The world stopped. The humming of the refrigerator faded away. The sound of my own breathing ceased. All I could hear was her question hanging in the air between us. Asterisk, should I just use the debit card for the joint account? Asterisk. The joint account, the account that now held a balance of $0.00. The account that was supposed to be her launchpad, her foundation, her future. She was looking at me waiting for an answer. A simple practical answer to a simple practical question. And I had no answer to give. My mind was a maelstrom of panic and grief. Every possible response felt like a betrayal. Do I lie, I could say? Let me handle it, sweetie. Don't you worry about it. I could buy her a few more days, maybe even a week of this pure, untainted happiness. But the lie would be a poison. The inevitable crash would be so much worse when it came, because she would know I had lied to her face. She would know I let her build her hopes higher and higher on a foundation I knew was already gone. The trust between us, the one pure thing I had left in my life, would be damaged maybe forever. I would be just like her mother, hiding a devastating truth behind a placid smile. Or do I tell her the truth? Do I look my 17-year-old daughter in her bright, hopeful eyes and tell her that her mother, the woman who was supposed to love and protect her above all else, has stolen her future to fund a fantasy with a 25-year-old boy? Do I tell her that the $50,000 we saved for 17 years, the money that represented her entire childhood of our hard work and sacrifice, is gone? Do I shatter her world right here, right now on a Tuesday evening, surrounded by the wreckage of her dreams on the living room floor? I looked at her face, so full of trust, so full of excitement. I saw the little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest watching cartoons. I saw the awkward middle schooler with braces who was terrified of her first school dance. I saw the determined teenager who stayed up all night studying for her finals, who poured her heart and soul into her college applications, who earned every single one of these acceptance letters through sheer force of will. She had done her part. My only job was to hold up mine, and I had failed. Isabella had made me fail. The silence stretched on. It grew from a pause into something heavy and suffocating. Sophia's smile had completely vanished now. Her brow was knitted with genuine worry. Dad, seriously, what's wrong? You're scaring me. Her voice was quiet. The fear in it was the final push. Lying would be an act of cowardice. It would be an attempt to protect myself from this moment, not to protect her from the truth. The truth was coming for her, whether I liked it or not. The only choice I had left was whether it would come from me, her father who loved her, or from the cold, impersonal reality of a declined payment and a lost university spot. She deserved better than that. She deserved the truth, no matter how ugly. I took a shaky breath. The decision settled in my soul, a cold, hard certainty. I was going to have to break her heart. I was going to have to destroy the girl in front of me so the woman she was meant to be could rise from the ashes. My eyes met hers. I opened my mouth to speak the most difficult words of my entire life forming on my tongue. Sophia, honey, we need to talk. Sit down, please. Before I could even finish my thought, before I could process the tidal wave of consequences bearing down on us, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an unknown number. Normally I'd ignore it, but in that moment, any distraction felt like a life raft. I held up a hand to Sophia, my voice barely a whisper. Hold on 1 second, sweetie. I answered the phone. Hello? A crisp professional voice on the other end said, Am I speaking with Samuel Gonzalez? I confirmed it was me. Sir, this is Officer Miller with the City Police Department. I'm calling in regard to a harassment complaint filed against you this afternoon by a Mr. Leo Vargas. My blood ran cold. Harassment, I was the one who was robbed. I was the one whose life had been detonated. I had shouted at him in a gym. I had embarrassed him. But he was filing a complaint against *me*. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. The officer continued explaining that Leo claimed I had threatened him and created a public disturbance at his place of employment. He wanted a restraining order. I was being formally warned not to make any further contact with Leo Vargas. I mumbled something about understanding and hung up the phone, my hand trembling. It wasn't just that they had taken the money. They were already building a wall around themselves, using the system to paint me as the villain, the unstable aggressor. They were one step ahead. As if on cue, the front door opened. It was Isabella. She walked in not with the look of a grieving wife or a repentant partner, but with the cold, hard expression of a business rival. She didn't even glance at Sophia, who was now staring at her eyes wide with confusion and hurt. Isabella's gaze was locked on me. What are you still doing here? She asked. Her voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. I was stunned into silence. What? What am I doing here? This is my home, Isabella. This is our daughter. She scoffed a bitter, ugly sound. It stopped being your home when you went and publicly assaulted my friend. You have embarrassed me. You have embarrassed this family. I want you to pack a bag and leave. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I looked from her cold, unforgiving face to my daughter's crumbling one. Your asterisk friend, asterisk Isabella, he's a 25-year-old kid you've been sleeping with. And you gave him our daughter's future. You gave him $50,000. It was my money too, she snapped back, her voice rising. It was a joint account. What I do with it is my business. You don't own me, Samuel, and you certainly don't get to run around town like a lunatic threatening people. Now get out. I don't want to see you. That was it. There was no remorse, no apology, no flicker of guilt for what she had done to Sophia. It was just anger. Anger at me for discovering her secret, for making a scene, for rocking the boat of her new life. In her eyes, I was the problem. My last sliver of hope that this was some horrible, impulsive mistake completely evaporated. This was a calculated decision. Defeated, I watched as she turned on her heel and walked upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. But I had one last desperate idea. A Hail Mary, the bank. Maybe, just maybe, if I explained the situation, they could do something. I found the number for my bank's fraud department, my fingers fumbling with the phone. I explained the situation to a patient-sounding woman on the other end. I told her the account was for my daughter's education, that the transfer of $50,000 was made without my knowledge or consent, that it was a catastrophic breach of trust. She listened politely. She asked for the account numbers and transaction details. I heard her typing for what felt like an eternity, and then she delivered the final blow. I'm sorry, Mr. Gonzalez, she said, her tone sympathetic but firm. I can see the transfer here, but the account is a standard joint savings account under your name and Isabella Gonzalez's name. As a legal owner of the account, she was fully authorized to make that transfer. There's no fraud from the bank's perspective. We can't reverse it. You'll have to settle this with her as a civil matter. A civil matter. The words hung in the air. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't theft. It was just legal. My wife had legally given our daughter's entire future to her boy toy, and the system that was supposed to protect me had just rubber-stamped the transaction. The call ended. The final door had slammed shut. And then, as if the universe had decided I hadn't suffered enough, my phone began to buzz again, and again, and again. It was a flood of notifications from social media. Friends, cousins, old colleagues I hadn't spoken to in years. They were all sending me the same thing. A link to a video. My heart sank. I clicked on it. There I was, a shaky cell phone video filmed by some random person at the gym. It showed me my face contorted in rage, pointing my finger in Leo's face. My voice was distorted, but the words were clear. The shock on the faces of the other gym members. Leo's smug, fearful expression. It was all there. The caption read, "Crazy old guy loses it on personal trainer at Equinox." Within hours, it had thousands of views. I was no longer just a man whose life was falling apart. I was a local spectacle, a meme, a joke, publicly shamed, legally powerless, and emotionally shattered. I was trapped. That night, after Isabella had left again, probably to be with him, I was wandering through the house like a ghost. I was looking for paperwork, anything. A life insurance policy, old 401k statements, trying to figure out if there was any financial wreckage I could salvage. I went into the home office and saw that in her haste to leave, Isabella had forgotten her tablet on the desk. Ordinarily, I would never have touched it, but we were so far past the point of respecting privacy. I picked it up. It was unlocked. Her message app was open, and it was open to her conversation with Leo. My thumb scrolled up almost against my will. I saw the messages from the past few days. I saw her telling him the transfer was complete. I saw his replies filled with heart emojis and promises of the life they were going to have. But then I kept scrolling. Back 6 months, I saw the beginning of the affair. The flirty texts, the hotel arrangements, the lies she told me about where she was. It was sickening, but it wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the messages from about a month ago. That's when the tone shifted. It became less about passion and more about planning. I saw them discussing the college fund. I saw Leo asking how much was in it, And then I saw the message from Isabella that stopped my heart. "He's been saving for 17 years like a little squirrel bearing his nuts," she wrote. $50,000. It's the perfect seed money for us. Seed money. Not a gift. Not a desperate act of a woman in love. It was seed money. For their future. For a business Leo wanted to start a boutique gym of his own. They had been planning it. They had looked at my 17 years of discipline, of skipping vacations, of driving the same car for a decade, of packing my own lunch every single day, and they saw it as an investment fund for their new life together. They mocked my sacrifice. They mocked my love for my daughter. I read how they planned the timing, waiting until just after the university acceptance letters arrived, knowing the first invoice would be the trigger. They wanted me to find out. They wanted the confrontation. It was all part of their plan to paint me as unstable to justify her leaving. The betrayal wasn't just an affair, it was a conspiracy, a cold, calculated financial execution. They hadn't just cheated on me. They had plotted to erase me and my daughter from our own lives and to build their future on the foundation of my life's work. The rage I felt at the gym was nothing compared to this. This was a deep, soul-crushing cold. It was the realization that the woman I had spent 18 years of my life with was a complete stranger, a monster hiding behind a familiar face. I put the tablet down. The anger was gone now, burned out, and replaced by the crushing weight of the full betrayal. I felt hollow. I walked into the living room where Sophia was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her college brochures now scattered and ignored on the floor. She had been crying. She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed. The time for lies and delays was over. She deserved the truth, all of it. I sat down next to her. I didn't know where to begin, so I just started. I told her everything. I told her about the affair. I told her about the joint account and how her mother had drained it. I told her the $50,000 was gone, given to Leo. I told her the bank couldn't help and that her mother and I were getting a divorce. I laid out the entire ugly, heartbreaking truth with no filter. Watching the understanding dawn on her face was the single most painful experience of my life. I watched the last vestiges of her childhood innocence shatter. I saw the image of her mother, her hero, crumble into dust. Her tears were silent at first, just tracks running down her cheeks. Then came the first sob, a ragged, wounded sound that tore through me. She didn't get angry. She didn't scream. She just broke. And I held her, my own tears mixing with hers, feeling like the biggest failure in the world. A failure as a husband, and now a failure as a provider who couldn't protect his child from the cruelty of her own mother. We were at the bottom, alone, publicly shamed, financially ruined, with a broken heart shared between us. I had no idea how we would ever climb out. But then something shifted. After hours of crying, after the grief had washed over us, Sophia pulled away. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and looked at me. Her expression wasn't one of defeat. It was one of quiet, steely resolve. A strength I recognized because it was the same strength that had gotten her through her final exams and into her dream school. "So what do we do now?" she asked. Her voice was shaky, but it wasn't the voice of a victim. It was the voice of a partner. Her question lit a fire in me. The fog of despair began to clear. I had been so focused on what I had lost: my wife, my money, my pride. But Sophia's question reframed everything. It wasn't about them anymore. It wasn't about revenge on Isabella and Leo. It was about us. It was about her. And her simple question, "What do we do now?" was the first step forward. The very next morning, I called a lawyer and formally filed for divorce. It wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of liberation. It was me taking back control, drawing a line in the sand. This old life is over. A new one starts today. That evening, Sophia and I sat down at the kitchen table. It wasn't with brochures for dream dorm rooms. It was with a laptop. We didn't talk about what her mother did. We talked about what we were going to do. We spent hours researching student loans. We looked up every scholarship and grant we could find. We read about work-study programs and university payment plans. We were no longer father and broken child. We were a team, a two-person army fighting for her future. The victory didn't come in a courtroom. It didn't come with a check from a remorseful Isabella. Leo probably opened his gym. I don't know, and I don't care. The money is gone forever. The real victory, the moment I knew we were going to be okay, came a week later. After navigating a mountain of paperwork, we had pieced together a new plan. A combination of federal loans, a small scholarship she found, and a monthly payment plan that I could just barely afford if I was careful. I logged into the university's payment portal. I looked at Sophia and she gave me a small, determined nod. I entered my credit card information and made the first payment. It wasn't $50,000. It was a small, manageable installment, but it was the most important payment I had ever made in my life. It was a promise. It was proof that we could not be broken. The final image of this nightmare isn't me shouting in a gym or crying with my daughter. It's us a few weeks later at that same kitchen table. Sophia's filling out her housing forms and I'm looking over the budget we created together. The house is quieter, but it's not empty. It's peaceful. We are a new family unit forged in the fires of betrayal, and we are building a new future. Not on the foundation of 17 years of savings that someone else stole, but on something much stronger, our own resilience built one day and one payment at a time. I lost my wife and my life savings, but I didn't lose my daughter. And I learned that her future was never about the money. It was about the fight, and we were finally fighting together.